And then in 3 months from now, we're going to have eight to 10 more hygiene hours that we need a week. Maybe 6 months, maybe another full-time hygienist. And that's how we grow a dental practice, is by providing enough value in that appointment that they want to come back and want to continue their care with us. And then we grow from there.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry look like to you? I'm Katie Polson, a dental hygienist and your host. Welcome to another special episode of Growth in Dentistry for our deep dive series. I'm Katie Polson.
And Adam Smith.
Adam's away from me. He's not right next to me, so he forgot the cue. So glad to have you here today on our podcast. Thanks for listening. Thank you if you're a new listener to our show. This is a different episode than we do on a regular cadence. And the goal with these episodes is really to just talk to people they've got their sleeves rolled up. They're in it every day. They're making a difference in their communities and making connection between data and how they use it and what does it look like in their practice and measure success. And so there we go. Data. We're a big data people here, obviously, at Dental Intelligence, but it's not useful unless you have the tools to act on it. So we have experts. Sometimes they pretend like they're not. And Dr. Steve Markowitz he's a very humble guy already, I can tell, but we're so glad to have him on. Before we get started though, I wanted to ask you, if you haven't joined our Facebook Dental Intelligence podcast community, please come join us there. It's a fun little group. And if you are a current customer of ours, we have our DI community within our analytics platform. It's a really great space for like-minded people to come together, ask questions. Again, asking questions like what we're doing here on this podcast with the deep dive is to how do I take these numbers and implement them and use them to actually make a change in my practice. And that DI community in our analytics module is really a great place to do that and to get ideas from other people. Also, if you aren't a customer of ours, by listening to our show here, you can go to get.dentalintel.net/podcast and get a $50 gift card when you complete a demo. So we'll have that link in our show notes at the end. But without further ado, I'll stop rambling and let the doctor speak for himself. Dr. Steve Markowitz, thank you so much for joining us today from Massachusetts.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Adam, for the opportunity. Happy to and excited to share my story. And I've been a Dental Intel customer, client, I don't know what you want to call me, for a long time. I love when I log on to see like my number 222 is like what number client I was. So I can tell all the fun is what we use Dental Intel for.
Awesome. And just for reference, we have like number 9,000 now. So number 222 is a big deal. Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm not trying to brag there, but okay. I also know that I'm also following, like last week, the episode that dropped was the new CEO of Dental Intel.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense for the next person to be on the podcast to be me.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, nice flex there, Dr. Markowitz. Nice flex.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you found yourself in dentistry, and then tell us a little bit about your practice, your locations. And
yeah, for sure. I'm a third generation dentist. I wanted to be a dentist because I wanted to be like my dad. Mm-hmm. Thought he was the coolest dude ever. Still is. My first year of dental school, he had a really bad ski accident closer to you out in Colorado, and lost 2/3 of his brain function in that accident, and unfortunately hasn't practiced since. And I was kind of thrown into having to be the leader or the owner of a dental practice without having any of the tools or ever seeing a patient. And then as I went through dental school and was meeting with my parents' accountant and meeting with associates, and fell in love with the service that is dentistry. I think it was the perfect marriage for me, but it also, out of necessity, made me realize that I need to surround myself with amazing people lean on to build a team, because I didn't have the skill set or the knowledge or the ability to treat patients, and I had to depend on people. So I learned that value of trust really quickly, and then not intentionally, but just by chance, opportunities have presented ourselves. So now we're a group of 5 dental offices, about a half hour outside Boston, 120 employees and growing, 16 providers, and are enjoying being able to impact our team just as much as our patients and our communities. And that's what I'm most proud of at this point.
Yeah. Well, I had no idea about your story. What an amazing story. That is.
Yeah, my dad's still alive. So, and he was definitely an entrepreneurial dentist. He had a very successful practice, and had visions of building a group larger than a single location.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a website that, until, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we kept, that was massfamilydentist.com. So our little group is called MFD, and it doesn't really stand for Mass Family Dentists. It stands for a tribute to my dad, as this is something that he wanted to do that we're lucky enough to be able to be growing towards. And it's what my stinking dad wanted to do. And he was a larger than life, he's a larger than life personality, and kind of filled the room with his personality. And it's what gets me up every morning, thinking about how the level of impact that he had on his team, on his patients. So I practice in our Leominster office, which was his office. And as a kind of a side note story, he hasn't been in there since 2006. There isn't a day that goes by that people don't ask, how's your dad doing? Say hi to your dad. I'm like, you haven't seen him in like 15, 16 years. And he's just a dentist. So if we can have that level of impact on people's lives, if we're truly caring for them as a dentist, there are very few professions, if any, that I think can touch people the way that dentistry can. So that's what we're trying to do. Just live up to what he kind of set the foundation for, and we'll keep trying every day to continue to live that, to continue that legacy.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I'm trying not to cry.
So I told that story like 50,000 times, and I think, Katie, this is the first time I did it without crying. So
way to go.
Well, I'm pretty proud of myself.
I'll clap
so
for you. No, but like, and those of you that listen to the podcast, and if you haven't before, my dad was a dentist. He passed away 10 years ago. And my brother's a dentist, and as a hygienist working in that practice, like that sentiment of how the impact of one single dentist can have on a community really it's huge. I mean, gosh, 10 years later, people come into the practice and they're like, oh, did they just tell me stories? They break down and cry. Like,
yeah.
he passed away 10 years ago, and you're still talking to me about, like, and it has nothing to do with their mouth and everything to do with the way that they felt when they were around him.
Yep.
So,
thank you. I didn't know that about you too either, Katie. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, but it really does, the impact that you can have on your patients. We just are really so lucky to be in this profession. It's a blessing every day. So thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah.
And as generation, I mean, it's just kind of a commonplace generational dentistry at this point. And I think the more I talk to people like us, the more I realize that our stories are very similar. And it's good to be in good company.
Thank you.
So this is a question I've started asking people just that are started a practice, because it really it's one that I think new dentists would love to know the answer to, which is like, what would you tell, I mean, your younger self? You're a year into dental school. I cannot even imagine at that point, you probably haven't even put your hands in someone's mouth. Like, like, what would you tell your younger self about, and I mean, you didn't start a dental practice, but you joined one, and you got thrown into one.
Yep.
What's some of the advice you would have given yourself now, looking back?
One day at a time. I think that's going to be the biggest lesson is you don't have to feel like you know everything from the first day you practice. And I think finding people who have done it before and asking them questions and surrounding yourselves with those types of people will close that timeline of getting to where you want to go. And I think that for dental students, a lot of the time it's very, I'm gonna get an A on this test. I'm gonna be top of my class, whatever it is. And then you get out and you're like, oh crap, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And that's very much okay. And the sooner that you can realize that there are a ton of people that want to give and help you grow in your career, the faster you'll get there. And go just be aware of when there are opportunities of people who want to help and take advantage of those.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that advice. I think a lot of times it's a lot. I don't know. I mean, like just in hygiene school, I felt like I knew everything. I came out, I'm like, well, I mean, I've been taught everything. What else do I have to learn? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think being able to embrace failure
Yeah.
can be a learned trait, especially for high performers or really high, we come out of dental school, we're doctors, we're the top of the food chain, whatever the heck that means. And embracing failure and learning the character of humility is a priceless trait that can be incredibly helpful, not for your own growth, but as you build a practice and build a team, developing other people as well.
Awesome. Yeah. That is great advice. I love that advice. So let's
take CE too.
Oh, take CE. Yeah.
I'll throw that little one in.
I mean, you kind of have to.
Yeah.
But
keep sharpening that skill set.
But I also think that that beyond CE, I mean, there's taking CE because you have to, and there's taking CE for the genuine like desire to learn. And if there's one thing that I've learned by watching my dad and my brother, and also a lot of dentists that I admire, I mean, you included, it seems like the people that are really do well in this industry are people that have like this like thirst for knowledge and like wanting to continue to learn and from all people, right? And I love that seems like a back like a off thing, but it's huge. Yeah, I love it.
Before we transition, Steve, I love the legacy that you're building and you're living up to with your dad starting these practices. And a lot of times when we start talking about metrics and turning people into metrics via our dashboard, it can almost make it seem like we're not focusing on the patient care anymore, right? We're looking at the numbers. We've turned people into statistics, but the jump here is you have something that you're really trying to accomplish, right? With your practice and providing this type of care for as many people in the community as possible, providing optimal care. If you just go in with this, hey, I hope I can do this, you may or may not accomplish that legacy. But when you look at the numbers behind it, those numbers are telling you to what extent you are accomplishing that goal and fulfilling that legacy that you're working on. So I hope that as we transition into like the numbers side of things, because your practice does phenomenally from a number standpoint, that people don't think
in
we're
some areas,
but in a lot that Katie and I like to.
Can I add to that, Adam?
Yeah.
I feel like we've used Dental Intel a lot for a long time, and the analytics dashboard. And I think as we've grown, we've used it in different ways, and I'm happy to expand on that as we continue to talk. But for us, data just tells a story. Like it takes the emotion out of it, and we can have a real conversation about reappointment percentage or how much we produce per hour, or whatever metric it is that we're looking at, but it really just tells a story of what's happened or what's going to happen, and then being able to use that to make sure that we're delivering the consistent level of care that we want to, and that's really how we use data. It's not for the sake of knowing that Carrie has a 98% reappointment percentage. It's that 98%. What is she doing that's creating such value that her patients want to come back, or they want to reappoint, or whatever data point that we're looking at? It's not for the sake of the number, it's for the sake of the story that number's telling us.
That's awesome. That's exactly the point that I was trying to make
Yeah.
is, you know, you say, I want to provide the best experience possible to all these people. Okay, well, what does providing the best experience look like in terms of numbers? People want to come back, right? So if we are doing things that people are liking, we should see a correlation in the numbers of more people being willing to come back. If we're presenting treatment in a way that people really like and are understanding, we should see more people accepting that treatment. So I love that you boiled it down to these numbers tell the story of what's actually happening in the practice, and that ultimately lets you provide the best standard of care and the best patient experience possible.
And it allows everyone to feel, to understand where we're going and feel successful and able to measure what the office is accomplishing. And I think that can also make a greater connection to our practices, to our mission, to what we're trying to do, to be able to feel like we're winning. I think everyone wants to be on a winning team, and setting actual measurables in place can help create that feeling of employee engagement and feel like they're winning.
Awesome. Really, really good. So I'm just gonna, for those that are into the numbers, which is probably why you're listening to this show. If you, MFD across all the 5 locations has a 1 to 2% year-over-year growth. That's been for a while, like that's over 2020, that's over all of it, and across all 5 locations. And when we look at that, that's a lagging indicator of a bunch of other tiny little metrics that made that possible.
Yep.
And so we've touched on it already a little bit, but when I got a chance to talk to you before we got on to record today, you have this really great philosophy on growing your dental practice. And I would love for people to hear that, because
what did I say, Katie?
It's a lot like what you just said. Like the numbers are.
It's not. Yeah, whatever I said. Let's repeat that.
Yeah.
No, I think that dentistry is very lucky, and there are very few industries that I know of that we're going to see you today, and then for your best interest, we're also going to see you again at most 6 months. That's an incredible opportunity, if we're just look from a business standpoint, to have repeat customers, patients for us, that benefit us as a practice and benefit the patient or the customer to continue their health. So we put a giant emphasis on reappointment rate, on getting those patients to come back, not only because it benefits the practice, but it benefits the patients. They're getting the most optimal care. So as our reappointment rate continues, our active patient numbers will increase as we're continuing to see those patients, add new patients, make sure that if we're adding enough value to our patients and have a strong enough relationship, they're not going to leave, so we can measure our attrition rates or our cancel rates or no-show rates, whatever measurement we want to look at for how we measure how we're retaining our patients. And then in 3 months from now, we're going to have 8 to 10 more hygiene hours that we need a week. Maybe 6 months, maybe another full-time hygienist. And that's how we grow a dental practice, is by providing enough value in that appointment that they want to come back and want to continue their care with us. And then we grow from there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what I said last time, but that's what I feel this time.
That idea shows and reflects. That's what's so amazing about numbers, is what you focus on is what grows, right? And that's what you see in your numbers. And so we can tell by, I mean, all 5 of your locations have over a 98% reappointment rate, which is way above the top 10% of all of our 9,000 practices.
If you look at when a new hygienist starts with us, those numbers aren't in the 90s.
Yeah.
So
what
it's
changes?
Communication. How it's expecting our patients to say yes to reappointing, and not asking them, just saying, I know I delivered a great experience for you today. What are you doing in 6 months and a day from today at 9 o'clock? And just putting them in the schedule. And
do your hygienists reappoint, or do they reappoint up front? Okay.
They reappoint in the back.
In the chair.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's part of our patient flow and patient experiences. Before that patient leaves the hygiene chair, they have their next appointment scheduled.
I'm just interested, just because I've done this for so long. Do you guys reappoint at the beginning of the appointment or after the appointment?
At the end, I'm sure there are different techniques, but we've always done it at the end. I'm sure our hygiene team would say that there's plenty of time as they're waiting for me to show up,
that they just do it random,
to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
As our doctors are taking their sweet time to get into the hygiene rooms.
Oh, there's so many good memes about hygienists waiting for doctors. I love them. But that's so.
We don't do it on purpose. I
know you don't. I know you don't. But that being said, that really is that's difficult to do, especially across. There's usually at least 1 or 2 hygienists that obviously are way better at it than the rest of them. But the whole practice is at that.
Well, and I think there are still people that are going to be better. Than others. But if we look at that as not like Stacy does it 98%, like, and use it as, I wonder what Stacy's doing in those conversations to make patients reappoint at that rate. And we are all open to, as a group, open to learning from how Stacy's doing it, then we all get better. And I think that's one thing that we've done, that Steph, who leads our hygiene team, has done at a special level, is creating that environment that if someone's doing something really well, let's celebrate that and learn from that, and not be jealous of what they're doing.
Let's all rise above to that level instead of cutting them down. That's really awesome.
That's awesome. And your approach to that really speaks to why your number is what it is, right? That to be able to maintain that across the different practices that you have, first of all, you've got to know where everyone's at, which you're looking at regularly. And then you've got to have people who are open to understanding why someone is doing better. Like you said, that's something that is not necessarily easy for some people to say, okay, they're better than me. Like, what can I learn? Right. So
yeah,
that's really awesome that you've already got that mentality built. And
it's not always been easy, and I don't think everyone's there's been challenges along the way with improving some of these numbers. But I think what really will get people to change is really understanding, why is this important? Why is this beneficial to the patient? And why are we looking at this number consistently? And that clarity, I think, provides enough motivation to change how the hygienists approach the reappointment.
Yeah.
I love that. Actually, sorry for like taking over this segment for a second, Katie. But someone mentioned in one of our Slack channels the other day that a doctor reached out and they said, hey, like, I'm having a really hard time getting buy-in from my team. Like, I've given them the numbers, what can I do? And someone actually made that comment, like, make sure that you tie these numbers back into what their overall goal is with providing patient care, right? How is that actually providing better patient care? And once they've figured that out and seen how it's going to impact, they'll be more willing to get on board. So I like that you said that.
Yeah, and hygienists, they as a entire they love their patients. I'm going to overgeneralize. They really want to take amazing care of their patients. And if our offices can provide the tools for them to take amazing care of their patients, they're going to do whatever it takes to be able to do that. And we can use the data to support them in that, and not be the reason. Like it's the reason to have a reappointment percentage of 98% is not to have a reappointment percentage of 98%. And that's something I know that hygienists as a group can get behind, is that 98% tells me how well we are at creating value, how good a job we do at creating value, how good a job we are at having at building the relationships that the patients want to come back.
Yeah. I want to, so this is something that I really struggled with as a hygienist. I didn't really understand the value of getting them back on the schedule. Like it didn't necessarily, I'm like, I know I did a good job. Why would they want to go somewhere else? I just was like, they'll schedule when they schedule. It'll be fine. And then when I started looking at the numbers more, at first of all, how hard it is to get a patient to come in once they've left the practice. But really, and these are fantastic things, that metrics that they really open my eyes. So maybe they'll open people that are listening, but over a 10-year period, an increase from 80% reappointment rate to 90% reappointment rate, the value of that is over $600,000 in production revenue for the practice. So it really opened my eyes to be like, wow, like when I actually make an effort, like it's not just a $90 cleaning, it adds up over time, and I can make a difference in the success of this practice by just assuming that they want to reappoint.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's such a fantastic,
on top of that, Katie, there's probably very, very seldom that you get into a cleaning in someone's mouth and you're like, wow, this is perfect, right? Like you don't even need to come in.
That's just the numbers. Yeah.
Right.
Besides actually helping the patient.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, the numbers are great, but there's nobody out there that, I won't say nobody. There are very, very, very few people out there that you're like, hey, you could probably get away with not coming in every 6 months, right? So that piece as well. And I know personally, if I don't schedule when I'm in the office, like I'm like, well, it was about 6 months ago, and it's probably been like 9 months or 12 months, and I'm pretty consistent about my cleanings. So it's really important to get it scheduled while you're in the office for health reasons, but like Katie said, also for financial reasons for the practice.
And from a employee standpoint, and we talk about this a lot in our offices, what's wonderful about any business and dentistry, the more successful the practice is, the more we can reinvest into our team, into technology, into all the things that make us excited to work for the practices that we do. And that only can happen if our practices are healthy, financially healthy.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's awesome. So I had a question here, and we've touched on it really in depth and a lot, which is how has data helped you lead your teams, which I think we've really kind of beat that over the head a little bit. But there's one aspect that I kind of wanted to touch on before we move on from that. And that is like, just taking it from more of like a general aspect to like really get into how that actually helps. How often are you guys looking at your number? How often is your team looking at their numbers? Do you do meetings with them? Like that kind of stuff. Like what does it look like actually on a day-to-day basis with looking at numbers and leading your team?
Yeah. Could you hear my smile? So it's 11:32 Eastern time here. I've probably been in dental intel already 3 or 4 times into my dashboard. Our leadership team and our managers are looking at it daily. We're having weekly meetings as a manager unit to discuss the numbers. Mm-hmm. And each employee will have a monthly one-on-one, and part of that conversation will be data driven. Whether it be, I don't know why we're talking about hygiene reappointment percentage, but that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
If that's something that is a point of interest for that month's conversation, but it can be with a doctor. It can be talking about the number of exams that you did, or the average treatment plan that you did. And I think that will have that will correlate to your overall production as you have multiple providers in the office and you're not the only one doing all the exams.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's one thing that we don't talk about often enough, and it's probably really helpful to dive into, is there's a lot of there's a lot of practice owners that would love to bring on another associate, but it's like I had Bob Spill on on another podcast a while. I don't know if it's aired yet or not, but they're talking about associates as a marriage, right? As like, and using data to measure that instead of just assuming. So I guess, what does that look like with your associates? Because we talk a lot about teams as in like your supporting staff and also providers and hygienists, but I don't think we don't talk about the associate and measuring their success. I'm assuming through the provider pulse is how you are doing that, but what does that look like?
So they'll receive from a data standpoint.
Yeah.
And again,
yeah.
So I think that at least once a month, there needs to be an opportunity for a discussion with that doctor. Every employee, but we'll talk about doctors here. They need to be heard. They need an opportunity to tell them what's going really well, what's not going well. How can the office serve them better? How can me as their go-to help them achieve whatever their goals are? And then we'll look, as part of that conversation, we'll look at their numbers. We'll look at how much are they producing? How much did they collect? How many exams did they do? How many emergency exams did they do? Or how many comp exams did they do? How many new patients did they see? What was their treatment acceptance? All of those data points will help direct the conversation, and then we can look for trends within their own year and compare month to month, and then compare that to what Dan might be doing or another provider might be doing that we can use as knowing what's possible to help have each of our doctors get to where they want to go, whether it be from what the type of treatments I want to do to the amount of money I want to make. Those are all conversations that data can help direct and tell the story.
Yeah, that's really great. You're teaching them how to go from this is how much money I want to make, and then also teaching them, well, then this is how much treatment that needs to be done, and this is how much diagnosing that needs to be done, and you're backing into that, right? And thinking,
and making sure that we don't lead with, you need to treatment plan $100,000 this month. But the more comprehensive we can be and the stronger our relationships are with our patients, the outcome is we're going to be treatment planning $100,000 of dentistry per month.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing that applies to hygienists applies to the doctors. We really want to take excellent care of our patients. Most of us are introverted in our personality and don't want to feel like we're selling, but how do we marriage this balance of, I want to be able to take care of these patients really well. This is what I know they need, but I'm a little hesitant to say that for whatever it makes me feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's where those conversations usually end up going is more of, okay, this is where we're at. What communication techniques, what relationship techniques, how do we build ourselves up as the authority to be able to have more impactful conversations with our patients so they want the dentistry that we know that they need.
I love this, Steve. I've never talked to a dentist that won't say, I would love to do more impactful dentistry in my career, right? Like there's no one that says that. But then you get people that are on different ends of the spectrum. They've kind of classified themselves as, I'm a conservative dentist, or I do more cosmetic cases. It sounds like you're taking the approach of, we all want to provide the best care. We want to impact as many people's lives as possible. This person and knowing these metrics is what allows you to have this conversation really openly and just say, look, such and such doctor wouldn't classify themselves as, hey, I'm a really good seller, right? Like that's not how they classify themselves. But if I look at numbers side by side, they're being able to provide more treatment to their patients. And that's either they're finding more or they're having more accepted. And obviously you want to do that, right? You want to provide those treatments, the optimal treatment. How do we change that conversation? That's a really, really healthy way to help people accomplish that goal that they have of providing optimal care to as many people as they can. So I really love that approach that you're taking to it. I'm curious, what does, and we haven't talked about this, but I'd assume you probably have pretty good retention on associates, on staff members, just based on the conversation that we've had. What does that look like? I know it's been a struggle in a lot of the industry right now.
Yeah,
but
we've been incredibly fortunate to have Dr. Unger, who actually worked for my dad as an example, has been there for 30 years almost. We've had multiple doctors who have been there for a very long time. And we have we're lucky enough to have very low turnover in our doctor group. And I think that comes from really caring about our doctors, but also providing them opportunities that they may not be able to get in other practices or elsewhere, and also balancing being able to have a healthy balance outside of the chair if that's something that they want. So if a doctor wants to work 3 days a week, they have the opportunity to work 3 days a week in our practice. If they want to work 5 days a week, they have the opportunity to work 5 days a week in our practice. I think there's enough flexibility, and what we need to do as the owning doctor for these associates is understand really what it is that they want and have the conversation openly and say, I hear that this is what you want. Let's work together to try and get that, whether it be a change in their schedule or a change in the amount of income that they're making, and be open with, we're gonna put some measurables to this, and this is where we want to go, and have them be on board with the path and the journey that we're taking together. And nowhere will it be me telling them this is how it has to be. And I think because of that, we've been lucky enough to have some amazing doctors with our group delivering amazing care, and our retention has been really high because of it.
That's awesome.
You've given them a sense of autonomy, right? That they otherwise probably could not have with being an associate. And
yeah, I hope that we are. And I also know that through my experience, or through some of our doctors who've been with us for a long time, some of their experiences, we can share, like, all right, I know that you did it this way, but why don't you try this?
Mm-hmm.
And we can have those open conversations, because I feel as though that they know that we actually care for their well-being. And then once you have that level of trust, then you can have more direct conversations about how to improve or change behavior, or whatever it is that we're trying to, whatever our goal is.
And obviously, I'm going to switch a little bit just to case acceptance, because I think that the conversations that you're having with your doctors and the way that they feel obviously trickles down into the way that they treat your patients. I mean, over all of the practices, the average case acceptance patient acceptance is over 80%. So for those of you that don't look at numbers often, that means that, if a patient came in with a full mouth reconstruction, they accepted a portion of it that day. So 80% of your patients leave with something accepted out of all of your treatment. That number is so crazy. And especially it's across all of the locations. And then on top of that, another number that we look at with case acceptance is treatment dollar acceptance. And that means the percentage of total dollars that were accepted. And a great office is about 40%, and you guys are at 50 across all of your locations. So it really does speak to the way that your doctors feel. I really think the autonomy of being, and so I'm assuming that they're learning from each other, but like what, I guess, training or what goes into, because I know I've worked with enough associates now. I worked at the VA. I worked with lots of new dentists. I know that it's not really being taught in dental school. So what is being taught to these doctors to get case acceptance like that across the board?
Well, first, it's not just the doctor. I think it's an entire team to
Sure.
get case acceptance. And also, but what we talk about, and maybe not, this is not as in direct terms, but we talk about meeting the patient where they are and then trying to get them to the next level or 1% better. So a lot of the times, if someone's coming in and they're not ready to hear that they need a full mouth treatment, they're probably not going to get presented full mouth treatment. That will make it would make me as the provider feel like I'm selling something, and the patient would only see the bill attached to what was being recommended, as opposed to the treatment that is going to benefit them. So I think part of that is we're not, as a group, going to push someone into treatment that they may not be ready to accept. We're going to talk about them and if say someone needs a full quadrant of dentistry, and it's beneficial for them to do it all in once, and if we do just one tooth, they may have to redo that. We tell them that. We say, I know that this may seem like a lot. There are 4 teeth on that lower right side that need to be addressed. And based on what I'm hearing and what your goals are, you probably just want to address one of those teeth. Is that fair? And they may say yes. If I'm reading that situation, they will probably say, yeah, I don't think I'm ready to address all 4 of them. They're not even bothering me. We use that as an opportunity to say, these are the risks of not doing all 4 of those. These are the benefits of doing all 4 of them. But we will be happy to just take care of that because this is what we know you want right now. And also, if this progresses like I expect it based on the signs and symptoms that I'm seeing today, you're most likely going to need to redo that tooth. Are you okay with that? And I think empathizing with the patient, meeting where they're at, allows them to not only just accept that, but also know that they're taking ownership of the decision that they're making, and not and knowing that in the future they may have to invest more in their mouths than they would have if they've just taken care of it today.
Yeah.
And some patients are, you know what? Okay, I understand that, and I know that I need a whatever it is, or I understand that, but doctor, I really think that at this point, this is what I'm comfortable investing into my mouth.
Yeah. I love that you said meeting them at their 1%. I can't emphasize what you just said enough. If you're struggling in listening to case acceptance, rewind the last 5 minutes and listen again to the way that you phrase that. I mean, I have a graduate degree in communication, and that just wrapped up all of my degree, is meeting them where they are. And I can't emphasize that enough. Again, if you are struggling, he just gave you the word for word like breakdown of what needs to be said, because
that's I think what we impress onto our doctors, especially as they first join our group. Your quality dentistry is the minimum. Like that gets you in the door. But what's going to get people to accept treatment and have you performing the type of dentistry that you want to perform? It has nothing to do with your margins. It's got to have everything of how you make people feel and how much they trust what you're saying, and that you care for them, and that they want to move forward with what you're presenting. And communication is the entire game of case acceptance.
Yeah, really agree.
I want to just clarify one thing here. You're saying meeting them where they're at.
Yep.
What does that look like in terms of in your practice? Sometimes people don't know where they're at.
Yep.
How do you show them that and establish that baseline of, okay, you're here, right? What's the prep for that in your offices?
So there's many different types of patients. So the patient that comes in and says, and Matt, I'll use my Boston accent for a second. Doc, I know I'm a mess. And then there's the patient that knows they have something going on, but doesn't know the extent. And then there's the patient that has no idea. So one of the data points that we track in our appointments is, does every patient have a picture? Dental Intel doesn't have that analytic, but we measure that. Every patient needs to have pictures taken so that we can communicate exactly what we're seeing. And we can make a joke of it and say, I know I mumble when I talk. I'm just going to point to this picture. This is what I'm seeing. And that will allow us to have the right conversation, and then asking patients about the information that we're sharing, not just telling them that I look at this picture, that picture needs a crown. Like that isn't going to get patients motivated. It's really talking about what you're seeing in that picture, waiting for that patient to respond in some way, and hopefully they'll say, what do I do about it? And if they do, then we're having a conversation about solutions, but we're not going straight to solutions if the patient isn't ready to hear the solution.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
that's what I mean by meeting them where they are, is not just rushing into not just rushing into the solution or rushing into the treatment plan. It's let's find out how motivated you are and how much you understand about dentistry and what are your goals. And sometimes I'll go into the room and I'll ask a question. I'll say, this may be something you've never heard a dentist say to you before, but how can someone like me, a dentist, help you best? And then just let them go. If I'm unsure of where they are in their relationship with their dentist.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I can't emphasize this enough. Katie and I have done several of these now, 7, 8. I've kind of lost track, but quite a few. And the practices that have the best case acceptance do the best job of helping the patient understand where they're at, right, and where they can be. So and it sounds like you have some really great questions to help kind of highlight that discrepancy, right? But you're taking pictures, you're making it really clear, this is where the current state of your oral health is, right? If I don't understand that, and you come in and you say, hey, you need 3 crowns, I'm like, why? Right? So I'm like, oh, you just want my money, right? At that point.
Yep.
So I like that you mentioned you take the pictures, and then I really love that question. How can someone like me help you the most, right? I've heard similar questions asked in similar ways in a similar scenario of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate your overall happiness with your oral health, right? Kind of, if they say 10 and you're like, well, I would say probably 1, then you've got a big ground to make up there. But it's a similar question to kind of gauge where they're at with their understanding of where their oral health is.
And it allows us to understand the expectations of the patient so that we can beat them. And that's something that we talk about a lot. Like, if we don't understand the patient's expectations, then there's no way for us to beat them. And we're just guessing, and we're probably going to that will lead to an upset patient. So they need to understand everything that is going to be happening in their appointment. They need to understand their financial obligations. And if we set both of those expectations for the patient, we have the opportunity to surpass it. And that's how we get happy patients who refer, growing practices, Google reviews, whatever Dental Intel comes up with next that can help help my practice.
That's our entire job. It's painful. Okay. So there's one thing that you guys do really well at, and we don't get an opportunity to really talk to practices about, because it's not something that we see very often, and that is across the board. You guys have a really low no-show and cancellation rate, and people would it's like one of those elusive drinks that keep you young forever. Everybody wants to know how to do that. So what does that look like in your practices to achieve that?
We have an amazing business team. First, we're calling every patient, sending out smoke signals. We'll do everything shy of picking them up to get them into their appointments. But I think that it starts with making having a strong enough relationship where patients don't want to cancel because they're afraid of how it's going to make their hygienist or their doctor feel. And so that's number one. And then having a system in place to so that's value. Like value has to be has to
to value you and your time. Yeah,
that's a non-negotiable. And then having a system in place to be able to confirm patients, making sure that they're going to show up to to do what they say they're going to do, without the, well, if you don't show up, we're going to charge you $50.
That wasn't even my question. Do you charge?
Never.
Wow. I'm serious when I say I've never seen a no-show rate that low without charging.
So we've this is what this is why I take pictures, because I mumble. But I hated when I first started, I would look at the schedule. This is my first couple of years in practice. I would look at it and be like, that person's not showing up. That person's not showing up. There's nothing that would drive me crazier than looking at the schedule and knowing that that person wasn't going to show up and then they didn't.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, that's crazy. So if we know that that person's not going to show up and we're looking at the schedule a week ahead or a couple of days ahead, that person needs to call us back to be able to, so that we know it's not just they're going to get a text or an email or a call. We need to have an actual conversation with this person to make sure that these high risk patients and their flagged are confirmed and are going to show up for their appointment.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know how many times I've been like, well, I know I'm going to have a 2-hour lunch today because Joanne's not showing up.
And that's crazy. That's not, and when you have a practice that has high demand, that's not fair to the patients that want to get in. That's not fair to the hygienist who's going to be sitting and doing nothing, or the doctor that's going to be sitting and doing nothing. That's not fair to the practice that still has that same level of overhead. There isn't regardless of what insurance plan you take, there is nothing that's more costly and will add percentage points to your overhead than an empty chair. So that no-show rate or that cancel rate has to be a priority for the entire team. That is not acceptable.
Yeah. And I would imagine your team that does that confirming spends a lot of their day doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a full-time job, and that also can feel like a grind. So those people who are doing that type of task, they need to see the value in what they're doing, and they can see that by having a full schedule. If you're going to say, Adam, your job today is you're going to call 100 patients and you're just going to confirm, and 20% of them are going to pick up, and you're going to leave messages. This is going to be your entire day. And then the next day you look and the schedule falls apart. How important does that feel for that person who's doing that? But if they're going to spend that time and it's going to take up a lot of their day, and then they look and they see a full schedule, and then they see a full a production goal that the office has hit, that they have a direct impact on the success of that practice.
Yeah.
And I think you can take these tasks that can feel like a grind and have been put a lot of importance on them.
Yeah. I don't know if you use follow-ups and if you guys do great or not, either way, but there's a lot of practices that do. And I think that's another one of the reasons why I love that tool specifically.
I think there's a lot of the tools in the analytics software that we haven't even.
It's kind of, you have to bite off a little bit at a time, but follow-ups, they have a reporting in there that allows you to really see, like, Diana made she contacted 14 people and she made 6 appointments, and that reflected in this many dollars. Like, it really does like attribute exactly to the front office, which is really hard to do without something like that. But it looks like you guys are doing it in a different way, but it's obviously paying off because they feel motivated. So
and they just want to know what they're doing. I feel like most employees, regardless of the business, want to know how the tasks that they're doing are relevant to the success of the business.
Yeah.
And I think we spend a lot of time and emphasis on trying to make sure that everyone knows how important they are to the success of the practice, to the successful patient outcomes that we're able to achieve.
Yeah. Really
So I do want to clarify one thing. First of all, this is probably the most frequently asked unanswered question that I see in all of the forums that I'm part of. Is how to decrease cancellation rate, or it's answered and the answer is like, yeah, that's not really a good answer, right? Like everyone's like, that's a nice thought, right? That's a lot of the responses that I see to it. But you've given two really beneficial pieces of wisdom here. First, make sure that the relationship is such that they feel bad canceling on you, knowing that your schedule is important. You provide value to everyone who's there. You put the time, you invest the time into that appointment, right? That's first and foremost. And then this is the clarifying piece that I wanted. You mentioned that when you know someone is high risk, which we can pretty easily identify in most practices at the front desk, they have to call you to keep that appointment. So do you let them know that that's the case, or so you just say, hey, we've got this scheduled, call us before such and such day to make sure that
Yeah,
good?
They'll leave that message. The front desk, when they call the patient, we'll leave that message saying, we will expect a call from you within 24 hours or 48 hours of that appointment to keep that appointment time.
Okay. See, that is something I don't really ever see done, but we could pick through in our office, we could pick through a day and be like, well, that one probably no show, that one probably no show. And like you said, I don't think people quite put the emphasis on this that they need to. If you look at 2 to 3 broken appointments in a day and look at what that does to your overhead and to your overall profitability, like you said, there's nothing that will eat away at your profitability aside from maybe accounts receivable collections faster than no shows.
Yep.
So those are two really amazing answers that are good answers to this question that, like I said, goes unanswered
so many times,
90% of the times.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I know that some people are thinking in their head, okay, they don't answer, or they don't call you back, and they show up for their appointment anyway.
Doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
It's maybe happened twice.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And my manager would know better than I do, but if we know they're not going to show up, and then we call them, text them, email them, another call, and there's no response. They don't value this appointment.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how I can think of one time that's happened, and then we hustle and figure out how to accommodate the patient and be like, dude, I called you 1,000,000 times. What the heck? Like, well, like if you had a friend and you called, texted, you were supposed to, you scheduled 6 months ago to meet for dinner, and then the week before you called, texted, and they never responded. Would you expect them to show up to dinner? Right. No way.
Would you go to that dinner?
I wouldn't even go.
Yeah.
So exactly. So when they that like 1 or 2 times when they show up, you're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, why are you
like I've been trying to get in touch with you for 2 weeks. Yeah. I hope you're okay.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't happen with regularity. And if that is happening, I would love the opportunity to speak to that doctor or that practice because that goes against human norms.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's a lot of practices out there that will, I guess, not go to the effort that you're going to, but they end up double booking that appointment anyway, knowing that people aren't going to come to cover that. Which
we've tried that in the past.
Yeah. Which is essentially kind of, this takes that idea to a step further. Yeah.
Yeah. We have tried that in the past. And again, it's that 1 or 2 times of every time that we have that happen, that patient ever actually showed up. But
Yeah.
And
That's
on
really
top of
good.
that, like, is this your most valuable patient? If that's the
Right,
perception that
right.
you have of them, oh, they're probably not going to show
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
yep,
They
You
might
know-
be frustrated when they leave,
Uh-huh.
but they already weren't coming most of the time.
If
So
they weed themselves out and find somebody else, that's probably not a bad thing.
yeah. So the way that we got rid of the that charging for no shows
Mhm.
was we had a patient who usually they'll make a stink of it, and we don't want to be in the business of collecting $50 for no shows. That's
Right.
not a good way to have profitability. And the way I explain it to my team is because they were like, well, that patient wins, and
Mhm.
I'm like, no, they I'm too selfish. I don't care about that $50 enough to make it consume an hour of my time, an hour of your time. Like our time is way too valuable
Mhm.
to focus on fighting with a patient over $50. We're
Mhm.
not going to win that battle, and we don't
Mhm.
want to be in that type of business.
Yeah.
So we're not going to start charging people. It's in our policies when they first sign. They know that that it's we
Possible.
highlight it, but
Mhm.
that's not going to be something that is a regular best business practice for us.
That's so good. I honestly could spend another hour talking to you.
Oh, thank you.
It's been so awesome.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's our time is up, but I do want to ask you, it's a question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, what does growth in dentistry mean to you?
You can ask me again in the future, but right now it's developing our people and our team, and that's why I get so excited about the opportunities that we're able to provide. My director of HR and finance started as a front desk person. My clinical director was a hygienist. The opportunities that we're able to provide and create based on the platform that we have here is I feel is what excites me most and what growth in dentistry means to me.
That's awesome. What a great answer. Well, it's been a blast. I've had so much fun.
Hooray!
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Steve Markowitz.
Thank you.
In
I appreciate it.
Massachusetts. Again, special thanks to him and also to Adam for joining me on the show. And thank you to our marketing department for all their work on this podcast. I'm Katie Poulsen. Keep growing.